Good afternoon, and welcome to the next session for Connections US 2021. Our speaker will be James Pigeon Fielder. He joined Colorado State University as an adjunct professor after retiring from the U.S. Air Force as a lieutenant colonel and associate professor of political science at the U.S. Air Force Academy. He is also serving as a Marine Corps University non-resident Krulak Fellow for the academic years 2021 through 2023, develops organizational war games under the name Liminal Operations, and is a role-playing game content creator for Evil Beagle Games. Pigeon researches interpersonal trust and emergent political processes through cyber-based interaction and through tabletop live action and digital gaming as natural experiments. He has over 2 decades of experience designing, executing, and assessing training exercises and wargames, from small group tabletop discussions to multi-day exercises engaging more than 50,000 participants. Please welcome Dr. Fielder.
Outstanding. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to be here. And so, yes, I'm going to be talking about how do you target the human when it comes to cyber war, as opposed to worrying so much about, the black boxes, the techniques, the technical aspect. How are you going after the person themselves? And this is an overview I'll be talking about. And this picture is just an example from, let's see. This is a little older now. It's about 10 years ago, but someone created a spoof Facebook page for Admiral Stavridis, and people believed it. And I'll explain to you what techniques they used to make this a believable page as we go through this talk. And you've already heard my introduction. I will just say, yes, I am a professional nerd, and I love every minute of it. And just also have this to prove that I was actually in the military at one point. I've adopted this civilian life very, very well. And if anyone asks why I'm called Pigeon, it's because of this old bird right here. I had a big barbecue at my house back in 1997. The entire unit was there, and everyone said, man, Pigeon Fielder looks like a big old pigeon himself. It was this bird I was named after, and he's anywhere from 25 to 38 years old. I should put him in my will. Anyway, so we're going to start with, what is trust? Basically, it's expectation that if I give something to someone, they're going to reciprocate and give me something back without deception. We have several different definitions here, such as expectation. Another actor will meet their obligations in a situation of uncertainty and risk. And that's key right there. You're taking a risk anytime you're working with somebody until you've slowly built up rapport. But as we'll see later, you could have perfect trust in somebody and it could still be undermined. Or Eric Uzelander at University of Maryland says just A expects B to do X. And broadly speaking, I'm pulling from Alexis de Tocqueville's classic Democracy in America, when he came to visit the US to see how we were different from continental Europe, how our democratic experiment was working. And he noticed that we built much of our power not on social hierarchy like they did on the continent, but on relations, social relations. Like, I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. I need to harvest my wheat. If you help me, I'll help you next week. So many things that would require the government to do in the continent, in the US, locals would do it themselves. They would fill potholes. They would build schools. They would build churches. They would work together because they built trust with each other over time. But it still requires faith. Even if you know someone really well, God, man, I love my best friend, but if I was going to loan him $50,000, I would have to have a lot of faith that I'm going to get that $50,000 back. And there's certainly examples out there of, what's the saying? If you open a business with your family, be prepared for the family to fall apart, that sort of thing. It comes down to this. Human society depends on trust to function. Although we are social beings, we don't necessarily immediately trust one another. And we tend to only trust a small group of friends that works around us. And it takes a long time to build trust with other groups. All right. So from that, what are the sources of trust and what are the dimensions of trust? And I got some stories for you here as well. Start with the sources. Could be presumptions that, let me think, how would I say? That would be if I go to a brick and mortar store, I'm going to assume that, okay, if this business has been here 10 years, I'm going to assume that it's likely an honest business. They're an honest broker. And I can go in there and make a purchase, and that purchase will be honored. And if I had to make a return, it will be honored as well. Also, surface inspection, picking up an object and looking at it, or looking at the person, looking like how they dress, how they talk, how they act. Even for myself, some of it is purposeful. I will admit some people might look at me like, man, look, he's got that long hair and a long beard. But other people will say, hey, look, he looks relaxed. He looks calm. He looks comfortable. So it's designed to make me feel welcoming to people. And it actually works with students and helps them bring out from their shells in class. Institutions, this would be something like as big as a government. Like, there's a reason why other countries buy the U.S. currency as a reserve currency, because they have faith and trust in the power of the U.S. dollar. Versus as an institution, maybe 10 years ago, I probably didn't want to invest in Zimbabwe dollars, and now Mugabe is probably rolling in his grave. But it can go smaller than that as well. For example, even my own institution, Colorado State University, we have a fairly fixed budget over time. And so I have this faith and expectation that CSU is probably not going to go out of business in the next year or two, if you will. And then finally, experience. I will say there's a reason I use Amazon for almost all my purchases. However they treat their workers, and if they're peeing in bottles or something like that, or being fired for being 5 minutes late, all I know is when I give my money to Amazon, a product arrives. And over 20 years, it has been proven over time. And if I have a problem, I send it back, and it's no hassle. Versus, do I want to expend that cognitive effort to invest into a website or a company I've never heard of before and I've never done business with before, and I hesitate? So I had to spend a lot more time building that experience, doing the surface inspection, building on my presumptions, like looking at the reviews, seeing how other people have used the site or not, and that sort of thing. It's easier to go with who I trust, ultimately. So now we can then move on to the dimensions of trust. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Sadly to say, people tend to trust people they find attractive. So I've already got a mark against myself right there. But someone who's well-dressed, clean-cut, and fits certain societal expectations in looks will be seen as trustworthy. Are they dynamic? This is another reason why a very, very good public speaker or motivational speaker can draw in crowds and get them to give up their money, because they're seen as dynamic and active and friendly and engaging, looking them in the eye and making everyone feel like they matter. They also will come off as an expert. Again, speaking for myself, I remember getting my doctorate in political science, coming to the 25th Air Force, and everyone finds out I have a PhD, and they think I'm like a astrophysicist with lightning shooting in my forehead. They have just assumed I was an expert in everything. That kind of helped a little bit. But yes, if you can demonstrate credentials and not just say I have a title, but I also have a list of actual products I've created, that builds trust. That makes people expect that, yes, his word counts. So if he says something, I'm going to assume that it's true. The intent. No offense to car salesmen out there, but think about if I come into a store or come into some sort of engagement where I feel like I'm being sold to, where it's only a one-way transaction, i.e. I'm supposed to give my money to somebody, that's going to actually make me not trust someone. Like, there's no relationship there. Let me build a relationship with you first. Then we can go into a transaction, because now I trust you a little bit more. In fact, just reading in, I'm trying to remember if it was New York Times or The Economist last week, talking about how younger generations looking to work want greater intention in their employment. They want to feel like that there's a transaction between themselves and their employer beyond just a paycheck. Localness. This was a really big deal when I was working in Afghanistan for a year, that people tend to trust those they know readily at hand. They know their neighbors. Their friends probably live close by. They go to the local store all the time. Even me now, having lived in Fort Collins just for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half, now there are places I go that people recognize me. Like the barista will say, "Hey, Pigeon." That encourages me to keep coming back because I feel like I'm a local commodity and I matter there. So I'm willing to give my money for all the beer and coffee they can suck me with. Then the reliability. Someone can be really friendly. They can be really nice. They can be really, they can have their heart in the right place. But if they can't meet their obligations, or they're selling me a really bad product and they don't have any type of warranty on it, I'm going to lose faith in them. And I'm probably not going to want to do business with them. And folks can think of people they've worked with in the past, or even very good friends. So they say, he's my friend, but I don't trust him with my stuff. I don't want to go into a transaction with this person. And I save faith for last. Some lists will actually put this at the top. I put this at the bottom, in that all this works together, but it comes down to, if you really don't know somebody, it really is a leap of faith that you're thinking, this, for me to proceed, I have to have this transaction. So I want this transaction to work. And everything about this person or this institution is telling me they are legit. Therefore, I'm going to give it a shot. Sometimes you're wrong. But if you've done this whole, inspection, odds are probably in your favor. Now, I got a couple of pictures here to describe that kind of dovetail, see what I did there, with these points. First, everyone knows the game diplomacy. There's a way to lose friends very quickly, because that's all about trying to undermine trust, if you will, even after spending a lot of time building on faith of another player, only to have them stab you in the back later. So these two images here, I don't know if you could see my mouse. The top one comes from World of Warcraft. This is probably, if someone in the comments is more familiar with it date-wise, it's around 2004, 2005. There was a funeral in the game for a real person who died. And her friends wanted to have a memorial for her to honor her life. And they decided to hold it in an area of the game that was open for player versus player combat. Like, it wasn't neutral ground. Assuming that if it's a funeral and everyone knows it's a funeral, you don't violate that social contract. Well, another guild finds out about it, comes to the funeral, takes all their weapons and slaughters everyone to the last person and takes all their stuff. And that was caused a huge immoral outrage in the game. We had one side saying, you don't break the trust of a ritual. Other side saying, well, you shouldn't have put it somewhere in an area where trust is not currency. It's about combat here. It's about not trusting each other. And then the bottom comes from EVE Online, and this is fairly recent. This is within the last 2 years, where the actual leader of a corporation, the vice of a corporation, not the actual leader, but his second in command. They had worked together for years on this corporation, had billions of dollars of in-game currency worth of money and material, but he got tired of working for this one guy. So one day he took all of the assets of his corporation that belonged to everyone who was in the corporation and just gave it to an opponent. It was just possibly one of the biggest betrayals. I mean, if you even think in human history, like outside of a game, it was shocking. It completely destroyed the corporation. It just fell apart in a single day. And this is an example of someone, you get these two people who've been working together for years, and one lost trust in the other, and then used that trust against someone else to carry out their own schemes, if you will. All right. Now then, how does this align with cyber-mediated trust? So all of this has really been about, except for maybe some Amazon examples, face-to-face interaction. Face-to-face is the best way to build trust with a person, because you could watch all the cues, verbal and nonverbal. So Zoom has its place, but the problem with Zoom is that we had to spend lots of cognitive capital watching multiple faces at once. We can't see all the nonverbal communication. We have to get over like even something as simple as bad audio. And for example, I'm assuming everyone can hear me just fine right now. Something like bad audio is going to ruin the communicative discourse, if you will. So video is second best. Next is audio. I actually have students who enjoy communicating just on audio, and then with the rise of that new social media platform Clubhouse, which is audio based only. Yes, you can't see the person, but they say in a way it becomes more raw and immediate, because you really have to concentrate on the words someone is saying and how they're saying it. So let's say face-to-face is the best, video and the audio are in the center, and text. Text is the absolute worst way to build a trust, because you can't see the other person. You don't know what they mean. Like, they could say something that they think is funny that you find offensive. It takes a very, very long time for communities to build trust on text-only platforms. The problem is even magnified more if they're anonymous. I can never really trust this person because I don't know what their real name is. I have no idea what they look like. And there's no way for us to build, on this faith. There's no way to reduce the uncertainty reduction principle, which I'll get to later. Further, in a cyber-mediated interaction, there's the trichotomy between the real person, who I am if I'm anonymous, like how do I hide behind a face or a facade, and do I build a persona around myself? Now, building a persona is particularly popular in a virtual world, like World of Warcraft, EVE Online, like a game, if you will, but also social tools like the old school Second Life, if you will. So now you put this together. Now I can talk about the uncertainty reduction theory. Think about what we just talked about in the last slide, the sources and dimensions of trust. The uncertainty reduction theory is that we're going to find ways, if I have to interact with somebody else and they had to interact with me, we're going to use all the tools at our disposal to try to build trust in some way, or reduce uncertainty in the person in front of me. So here's some crazy ideas for that. The idea of presence. I'm going to pull this from the next bullet. Presence. That's as long as an individual is represented by something in a virtual world. It could be as fancy as a fully kitted out, third-person adventurer with a nice weapon and a, shiny teeth or something like that, to an abstract road-like game where they're just like an ampersand symbol. But as long as a person is represented by something on the screen, they inject their identity into that object. And when those objects interact with each other, it helps reduce uncertainty, because now they can see each other. So in a way, it's easier to build trust online in a game through an avatar than it is through text, even though the avatar looks nothing like you. It might even not even be the same gender, if you will. As we'll see later, though, when it comes to building cyber warfare in the trust domain, you're trying to maximize undermining the uncertainty reduction theory. So what do we have here? Everyone remembers Jeff and Tina, if you will. But compare, they're trying to do this training where we can see a face. Like, oh, okay, it's a face. It's someone I might work with. And I've seen people dress up like Jeff for Halloween. Or it could be a multi-user dungeon over here with just all it is lines of text. It's very abstract, and people are just represented by characters, like letters and characters. But people really get immersed in the game who have played it a long time. And we've already talked about Zoom, how it says pluses and minuses. And I will add one more thing for not just Second Life, but any face-to-face, or I'm sorry, online interaction. Most people will try to build a more attractive version of themselves in a game. So more often than not, they don't go too far off the ledge in totally recreating themselves. They recreate themselves, but better. So odds are you're dealing with some version of that person. Not always, but some version of that person. I want to break to the StreamYard right quick to make sure, see if anyone has any questions, comments, or thinly veiled threats. And okay, good. I don't see anything. All right, back to my slides. All right, so how do you then undermine trust in cyber conflict? I'll call it cyber-mediated trust. Ultimately, it's not a war of viruses or a war of worms or DDoS attacks. It is trying to undermine the decision-making processes of your adversary, trying to break his influence, trying to make people not trust your target, if you will. And you're trying to control the narrative. I'm trying to remember if I read that somewhere, if I coined it myself. It'd be really cool if I came up with the idea of narrative operations, but I'm not that cool. So an example being, this is, I don't know if everyone remembers one of the flash crashes of, was this 2009? Where people read this tweet online and the market just went like 500 or 600 points in seconds. Because first people started to trade, and then it started triggering electronic trades, and it was just a huge quagmire. All because someone posted a fake tweet. The problem was someone was able to hack into a site that everyone already trusted. It was like Newsweek or New York Times. I wish this image had more information on it. I remember the event, but I just can't remember who actually it was. So they already trust them. They have no reason to doubt them when they see this. And that just spreads like wildfire. It gets shared, it gets retweeted, and before you know it, it takes President Obama himself to get up on the screen and go, no, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Having lunch with mama or something like that. And as you can see, the fake tweet dropped, quite a bit. It recovered by the end of the day once folks realized it was not true. But imagine if this had pressed on or carried on even longer, if you will. How would it have shattered more confidence in the markets, if you will? So in a way, this is gaming the uncertainty reduction theory. Other examples of gaming the uncertainty reduction theory are, let's see, like Facebook. Facebook is particularly dangerous for spreading false information because you use real names and real faces. Real faces, face-to-face interaction. People immediately trust a face when they see it. So if I can build a really nice-looking Facebook page with an attractive person on it, and with normal, otherwise like median or center of the road post or whatnot, people are going to trust it. It's going to break the uncertainty reduction theory, and people are going to see, well, this is a real person. Oh, look, they're already with other friends of mine. Therefore, they must be good. So now it's increased my faith. I don't have to do as much surface inspection. I'm going to just believe everything they say. And it worked. It worked. Russian efforts to undermine the 2016 presidential election. It's like you don't really need that expensive virus if you can put together a couple of really, really good Twitter handles and Facebook pages. Just spread false information. In that sense, it's not the systems that are centers of gravity. It's like, yes, the ransomware attacks against the meat processing plant and against the pipeline. Okay, that's raising the stakes a little bit. But in a way, the centers of gravity when you target trust are not objects. They're human trust and time. Like you're trying to increase your available time, take away theirs, and make them your opponent doubt everything that they see. So you become psychologically ascendant on top of your opponent. Anything you can do to create noise in the system, create false signals like this, spend time curating a nice Twitter that everyone follows, and then put out some sort of news leak, maybe have it backed up by another page you're running. And it takes time for gatekeepers to decide what's true and what's not, or actually come out and say, no, this is not correct. But even then, as we've seen with various conspiracy theories, you do it well enough, you can keep someone permanently convinced that you're right and everyone else is wrong. And now you've built yourself an audience that you can play. You're targeting what I say semantic and syntactic. Both semantic, what are the types of words you use and the meaning, like how you come across as on an interface. Do you sound nice? Do you sound engaging? Syntactic targeting, that's how do I break terms? How do I break grammar? How do I break communication systems so I can inject my own message? And then finally, it comes down to, I've already used psychological ascendancy here, but also attribution superiority, that if you've done this right, no one knows what the truth is anymore. They don't know who to peg. They don't know who to blame. And some people will always accept your message after that point. So it's quite frightening if someone could actually pull that off at a more sustained level, if you will. So ultimately it comes down to then, this isn't about targeting machines, it's targeting how people respond to the attack. All right. Now I want to throw in a short note on cyber deterrence, because people always ask, well, how does this play into deterrence? And is deterrence a thing in the cyber domain? So I'll make this quick. What does deterrence require? If I'm thinking about either conventional deterrence or nuclear deterrence, commitment and credibility. If I say I'm going to do it, I actually do it. If I say that if you cross this line, I'm going to launch this nuclear weapon or invade your country, then I actually do it. And people believe it when you say it. So with a nuclear weapon, I can deter someone by saying, the opponent knows what this weapon's going to do if I launch it. They can go to a YouTube video or whatnot and see, okay, this is bad juju right here. Cyber deterrence, I'd argue that it works because the opponent only thinks they know what the weapon does. So when President Obama or President Trump or President Biden gets up and says, well, we have this virus that's covered in tentacles and slime and poison and all that, when we inject it in the system, it's going to destroy every toilet in our opponent's state. If we've built up our credibility, then our opponent will think, okay, then that's actually what they're going to do. Limitations of cyber deterrence, though, however, and you may have heard this already. Okay, they launched that tentacle thing that destroys toilets. All right, they've launched it once. Well, now everyone gets their hands on that weapon, or they find a means to fix the exploit. We don't know if it necessarily worked, unless there are a lot of people are complaining about broken toilets in Iran or wherever else we want to attack. And once it's been fired once, now the opponent can take it and they can respin it for their own purposes. So they can send it back at us and say, we're going to destroy all of your, what would be particularly bad, microwave ovens or something like that. And that's happened before, like when Iran respun the, oh crap, what was the name of that virus that we allegedly launched against Natanz facility? Anyway, they respun it as the Shamum virus against Saudi Arabia. Anyway, the reason I have this here in the middle of all this talk about cyber-mediated trust is that this fundamentally is about the weapon, and the weapon targeting something infrastructure related. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Cyber deterrence could be, we have the means to break our opponent's decision-making process with other than weaponized means. Like we can use narrative instead. So from that, I have 3 models to build on here. Two, at least one you should recognize, the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. If I can do this faster than anyone, than my opponent, then I'm likely going to succeed. But there's also the trust production process, which is a way of describing how you overcome the uncertainty reduction theory, like this back and forth. We're doing, okay, we've made a transaction. If the cycle continues, in a way, the truster and trustee boxes get closer together until now we've developed a circle of trust that's likely very strong. And then one of my favorite models, the Shannon-Weaver communication model, just it's like playing phone tag. The idea that information has to go through all these nodes to get to its destination, and I would say and back, and anywhere along the way, there could be noise. And the destination has to have trust. The information they receive from the source is correct. So what do these three models have in common? This. If I'm going to attack using a cyber trust model, I want to inject noise somewhere in these systems. I want people to doubt the person they're interacting with. I want person to doubt their sensors and their capabilities, doubt their ability to act faster than their opponent. I want people to doubt the information they're receiving. And that, my friends, I don't think that's terribly expensive to do. So how do you do that? Well, start here. I'm not going to go through this entire list because we don't have that kind of time. And who wants to listen to me all day? My list always starts with the objectives. This is my Wargame design process, and the objective being, if I know I'm going to measure this, I'm going to work backwards and then find game mechanics that support meeting this objective. So in this case, my objective is to target human decision-making processes in a cyber system. And as the quote says here, it doesn't have to be, like, you don't have to have a CISSP certification or Network Security Plus or throw out other acronyms. It doesn't have to be very technically complicated if your focus is on just the human decision-making process. So thinking then, what games would I use and what mechanics would I use to build a theoretical cyber trust wargame? Most of these are mechanics. You'll notice that two of them, though, are actual wargame styles versus mechanics, the Matrix game and the Seminar game. So my mechanics I picked here, and this is not all inclusive, you might think of more examples, are focused on basically undercutting an opponent, having more power than they do, but the other player doesn't know that. Ways that I can stop their decision-making process some way, or they can't see what I'm doing. They don't have perfect information on me and whatnot. Or red herrings, they think something is really, really important when it's actually not. I've created a distraction. And the reason I threw in two types of games is I think Seminar and Matrix or other kind of narrative-style games are good ways, are good means to talk through asymmetric systems. And actually in an extended form game, like if I had someone in a Matrix game or a Seminar for a week, adjusting the hours, adjusting the room temperature, adjusting how much coffee is available, is like I make things a little bit uncomfortable for the players, so their decision-making becomes more difficult. And so it makes it easier then for one side or the other to try to get information dominance on another. And then I looked at my game shelf thinking, what games would I use? And again, this is not all inclusive. It's a mixture of like negotiation games, betrayal games, systems where you're trying to, like Lords of Waterdeep, where you're trying to gain favor with different parts of town at the cost of your opponent. Games where you don't have perfect information, asymmetry like Netrunner or Root, and that sort of thing. Or the Red Dragon Inn, the interrupt card. Like, well, I'll show you the image in a second. I'll talk through some of these. And as I like to quote the great Jim Dunnigan, keep it simple and plagiarize when it comes to designing these. But of course, when he says plagiarize, don't I know it makes academics like cringe if they say that, but don't try to build this game just from your own mind, from the ground up. Try to think of games that already have mechanics you're looking for that will help support your objective. So looking at some examples here, let's see, the Red Dragon Inn. One is a great excuse to drink beer. It has an interrupt card where no matter whose turn it is, anyone can throw a card to stop them from moving. And of course, the other opponent has no idea they have that capability. So again, you're kind of you're inserting noise into it. Distant Plane, the negotiation aspect of it, like withholding information or trying to imply power that you don't have. One of many betrayal games where one of the players is a turncoat and will be playing against everyone else. Or if you play Among Us on Steam or something like that. And I'll say one more, Prowlers and Paragons. Disclosure, this is the Evil Beagle Games, but part of Evil Beagle Games, but I do not write for Prowlers and Paragons. So I don't profit from it. But anyway, it has a dice mechanic that favors expertise. So why does this matter for Cyber Trust? If you don't know your opponent, you could find yourself woefully outclassed when you engage with them if you don't know anything about them. And you find yourself your butt handed to you back on a platter. Well, let's see. And yeah, great. Netrunner, asymmetric. We have, the corporation versus a hacker, if you will. All right. So I have some references here for you. Actually, I got a ton more. Actually, if you email me at the next address, the email address I'll give you in a second, I have a handout I created for Colorado State University faculty with a bunch of references and game recommendations and places to download game software and whatnot. Free of charge. No, I'm not marketing anything to you. It's created for faculty on behalf of faculty. And it's a CSU product, not a personal product. All right. So with that, I will stop here, which leaves me a little bit for questions, comments, concerns, and thinly veiled threats. And I'm going to break out of the slide view to see if I've missed anything. My fear, of course, is I will come back in and say, you've been muted for the last 45 minutes, and that was stink. All right. Okay. How do you create trust in a cyber environment which inherently punishes trust? Man, that's a great question. I would say it still comes down to trusting individuals that you already know. So let's see. So let's say I'm working at the 25th Air Force, and I have to engage in conversation with a colleague at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that I've known for like 10 or 15 years. Odds are, like, even in a distributed environment, I trust that person. I know that person. Or working in nodes, like in a shop, we have 20 people. Odds are you're going to trust those people. But this is still, that's very military centric. I'm trying to think in terms of like Twitter, Facebook, social media, if you will, the rotten core and the rotten side of cyber media. This answer is a little harder. Creating trust, it requires users to expend that extra time doing surface inspection. Go back to that slide where to describe the dimensions of trust and sources of trust. You don't want to take the easy route. You want to do your due diligence. I'd say a lot of people don't do their due diligence. They'll get a sensational meme on Facebook and it appeals to them emotionally, and they immediately share it, and it goes like wildfire, not looking to see whether it was true or not. So it requires expending that extra cognitive brain power. That's what I can think of off the top of my head right now. I just felt to Birdman. Cyber war game, you don't want to develop trust. Yeah, in the game itself, it's all about undermining your opponent. So I should call it like negative trust or something like that. How do you develop psychological resilience against the loss of trust in the cyber domain. Again, I would say do individual due diligence. And then I'd also put, going back, I'm going to go back to the sources and dimensions here. Come on. I would focus then on expertness, localness, and reliability then. Like attraction can be spoofed, dynamism can be spoofed. Expertness, there's a point, it can be spoofed to a point, but at some point someone's, like the cat will get out of the bag, the wizard's curtain will be opened, and you'll know that they're, false. Localness and reliability, though, you know who you work with, and you know if your system is stable, generally speaking. Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm sorry. I think another question just popped up and I missed it. I was looking at what percentage of nonverbal communication do we lose through Zoom? I don't know the exact percentage amount, but it's considerable. Here's some examples. One, we're mostly sitting down. So we're not using our full core. Like even if I'm teaching, I'm a lot more dynamic in an actual physical classroom. I pace the room, and I'm like a cross between Sam Kinison and Rodney Dangerfield from back to school, but less profanity. But here I'm like confined in a box, so I feel more reserved. And then again, it's not just my individual body language. Let's say you have like the Brady Bunch thing going on. You're trying to track all of it at the same time, and that's very, very exhausting for people. They don't realize it, but it takes a lot of brain power to process all those communications at the same time. So I would say it's fairly considerable. I don't know exactly, but it's considerable. What is a blind person's equivalent to building face-to-face trust? How does an avatar matter to someone who can't see? That would go back to audio. The use of, I know students who like podcasts, and they even though it's like a one-to-many, like they might not necessarily be interacting directly back with a podcaster immediately. They say, well, I enjoy listening to this person. His information, I like his information, but I like his delivery. Like I like his sound. I like his voice or her voice or whatnot. And so because of those, they don't see the nonverbal cues, but the podcaster is building up on their delivery skills, if you will. And actually, I have an invite. I have Clubhouse, the new audio-based social media that people really enjoy. Like it's all just talk, and you don't actually see people, I guess. I haven't tried it yet, though. So that'd be another method. Having it more many-to-many as opposed to one-to-many. Is there a role in developing trust in the cyber realm for is there a role in developing trust in the cyber realm for in turn showing trust in others to encourage their trust? I'm going to use Amazon as an example here for good or ill. So let's say you take a product or a medium or something that already has established trust. Like I already said, I trust that if I purchase from Amazon, something happens. Well, then when Amazon opens up their market for other third-party sellers to jump on board and also sell their wares through it, they're kind of riding the coattails of Amazon's trust system. So if I buy a used book from a used bookseller on Amazon, I'm already inclined to trust them because I know that they fall under the umbrella of Amazon's business practices, if you will, in terms of returns or whatnot. So you'd have to basically, it's like taking the shark and the parasite model. If you have the shark that already has inherent trust, or a population trusts it, you latch onto it. You join, you become part of the umbrella of that trustworthy medium, if that makes sense. How to implement cyber into a multi-domain wargame to represent potential attacks by others. If you, assuming, let's say this is part of, how should I say? Assuming you're using cyber in a way that it doesn't necessarily have to be super technical. It's just we know that one side has capability X and they launched it, and this capability X should do this if it works. I would focus more on the what the intended outcome of the weapon is, or outcome of the attack is, because then the intent is to test, in my assessment, test the player's ability to react to that outcome. So it could be, all right, so we've dropped a card that says the Red Force has launched a DDoS attack against our servers located in Elbonia. We probably don't know necessarily the guts and bells and whistles and how to prevent a DDoS attack. But what we can see is, all right, you know your systems are down, players. What do you do? Like, do you have a backup plan? Can you rebuild your data? Can you go to alternate communications tools? Like, can you get off the computers and use phones for a second? So again, just like seeing how the players react and respond to it, if that helps. Again, I'm pretty sure there was a question I missed because I was looking at my slide. It disappeared. Something with the word, it had the word psychology in it. Oh, that, okay. All right. I guess already, that's the one I did get it. Okay. Anything else? We have no more unanswered questions. Okay. Well.
Well, thank you, sir, for an excellent presentation, and thank you to our participants for submitting some good questions. That will wrap up our session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.